Okay, in this penultimate video, we're going from session 10 to session 11, and though there's no difference between the pages, if you remember with session 10, we introduced the idea there's a line of text going to be appearing up here. We introduced the text that was going to say "Welcome to your contact book," and we were beginning the structure of login. With the session 10, we can still see add contact, edit, and delete, despite the thing that we're not logged in here. Let's have a look at session 11. Session 11 doesn't change at all. We still got add contact, edit, delete visible. But what we do have is, unlike session 10, I can now use the test user account that we created very early on. Password is the password. Click on login, and it's given me that line. Welcome to your contact book, Gary -log out. If I log out, if I try to change that at all, let's say I still use the test user, but let's say I put something else in there, I get that error message. So there's the error message that we created last time, and it's showing up here in red because the CSS tells it to. So we've got the ability to load this, and it's trying to log in. We can see that it's tried to use a get state to pull the data across. Let's have a look at second. What I'm going to do is load the page up with its default. Remember when we created the contact database that we created two tables, TBL contacts and TBL users. We've been using TBL contacts throughout, but TBL users we've left till now. TBL users is made up of four fields in the table: user ID, which is the unique identifier; str user, which is the test user. So test user is our username. So str user is the username. Str password is an encrypted password. This is the word password, but heavily encrypted. And str first is then the first name of whoever the person is on here. So that's quite relatively simple. Let's have a look at how the system works. Here's the code from the two pages. This is from session 10, and we can see that we've got the session start and we've got the database, and everything started changing around about line 25. Let's have a look at the session 11, and we can see that everything starts changing a lot sooner than that. In fact, we get this whole new line and nothing looks similar from there. The end section of this is identical to how it was before. It's actually this middle section in here that's changed considerably. I'm going to get rid of the session 10 because we don't need it now, and I'm going to get rid of the session 10 and the table here. So let's have a look at the session 11 that we've got here. Let's work on the principle that we've just come to the computer. So we've just gone to session 11 as I have done here, and it takes me to this page. So what is our document doing then? Well, obviously the browser's called for the PHP file. Our PHP server's gone off and it started reading through it. It recognizes this top part as simple HTML. So it recognizes it as HTML5, runs through the header, and it pulls in the CSS. That's not the PHP server, that's the browser. So the browser grabs our CSS and knows how to format. We then come to the session start, and that's what starts off a unique session for this browser. So this browser has a unique identifier that the system sets up that connects it to the PHP server so that they can talk to each other and they know which session they're talking about. So when you go onto places like eBay, you'll have a session start, and that session will give you a unique identifier from everyone else, which means that when you send instructions back to eBay, it knows which user you are, what you're talking about, and what your last communication was. We connect to the database just as we did before, but then it comes to line 19. Line 19 says if, sorry, not line 19. Line 19 is simply checking if the system's dead, so if the database didn't select properly. It's line 21 we're looking at. And line 21 says if is set, just take that up to the top so you can see it. If is set and the get log. So we're looking at a get statement in here. There are no get statements. We can't see any extension to there. So there is no get. So if is set, and that would come back false. That is not true. It is not set. So it doesn't read the first brackets, goes right to the last bracket, gets to the end of the PHP, builds up the HTML that we've had before and since the very beginning, and then comes this PHP structure and says if not is set session user. Well, we haven't set a session user yet, so this is true. This has not is set, so this has not been set, so there is no session user. So it comes to here and it says if is set hash dollar logon error. Well, we haven't set a dollar logon error, so this is not true. So it goes to the else, it introduces the blank line, and then in HTML simply builds the form we're looking at. Notice the action with the form is to run the commands, run the index.php, but with the get extension of log equals in. It then comes down to the bracket, ends there, and then builds the rest of the page. So that's no different from before. It ignores all the extra code. But now let's look at the fact that if we type in a username, so if I type in test user and password and click on, well, in fact, let's not do the password. I'm going to type the password incorrect. Incorrect? That's appalling. Anyway, I'm going to type in duckling, which is not the password, and I'm going to clock on or click on login. I don't mind. You can clock on if you wish to, but that's a little bit weird. Anyway, what happened now is when I clicked on login, it actually executed. So I clicked on the button, clicked on submit, and its action was to do this. It uses the post to send the data. What data? Well, the username and password. So those are sent as post commands. But I have sent a get command as well. So index.php login. So that sent a login, and there it is there. That takes us back to this code. So the page loads as before, gets the session start, connects to the database, and it says if is set get log. Well, we now know it is set because it's there. So we now know that that is set. So it now runs into the brackets. And it says if the value of get log is equal to, notice two equal signs for equal to in an if statement. So if you're doing a test, it's two equal signs. So if get log is equal to out, well, we haven't clicked on the log out. In fact, all that we've got for the get log is in. If we have a look, it says log equals in, so that's wrong. So that's clearly not the situation. So log out is incorrect. So it ignores this code, goes to this line. If get log equals in, which it does. So it goes to the first line. It says take the post username and store that in $user. Take the post password and store that in a new variable, local variable called password. Then it builds a query. Now this query here is a select query, and what it's saying is select everything from the TBL users. So select everything from this table where str user, that field, is equal to, and in the quotes, remember, because it's a string, $user. So it puts the value that was stored here, whatever was put in that text box for username, it's been stored here, and now it's being used here. And str password. Now the only difference with str password is if I sent it raw, it would compare the text with what we had in there. So what we have to do is re-encode the password. So whatever I typed in, which in this case was duckling, it's going to convert and it's going to encode it for us. And that's been encoded and is compared to what is stored at str password. So it's going to look for the same username with the same password. Then it runs this SQL command. So it executes this and stores the result in $user. Something we've used before, but we're going to use now to successfully see if we've had the success, is we're counting the number of rows returned. Now if this is correct, I have one username and password. Right. If this is correct, I should end up with one row response. But if it is incorrect, if it can't find someone with that specific username and that specific password, then this will be 0. So I assign the number of rows, the number of data rows extracted from the system, returned by the SQL, That value will be stored in total user. And the next if says if the total number of users is equal to 1. Well, we know that I entered test username. That would have come back successfully here because there is a test user as a username. But the password for test user is password, but I use the word duckling, so this part will fail. So this will return 0 rows. So it will not be equal to 1. Therefore, this is not true, and it will jump to the else statement. The else statement makes a very simple statement. $logon underscore error is equal to this statement here. So you can see I've only got one single line, and all it's doing is storing this string in this variable, which we know we've used before. It then ends the brackets, goes through these lines which we've seen before, and it says if not is set. Well, we haven't set the session user, so that's not been set because we didn't have a successful login. Therefore, it then comes into here and says doggone error. Well, it was set because I typed in duckling, not password. So therefore, it says if this is set, it is. So it then echoes that command. It sends the $logon using the class, the CSS class error, to make it red and everything else. So it uses that and displays that instead of displaying the line break we originally saw. Then it loads the form, then it ends, and then it goes right past this and loads the page as normal. So relatively straightforward, relatively simple. Okay, but what if I type in the correct username and the correct password? So test user and password. Right, now let's have a look at what's happened. So it's gone off, still at the top, done log equals in. So again, it's reloaded the page, come down to here, session start, blah, blah, blah. Yes, it is set because we've seen that. No, it's not out, so we can ignore all this part here. It doesn't look at this code here. And it says, if get log is equal to in, which it is, does the transfer as we saw before, runs the query. But this time, not only is this correct, but this is also correct. And therefore, it returns 1 row. So if total of user is equal to 1, which it is, so it will run the code in here, and the code says make the user str first and store that in the session, and that session comes all the way back from here, session start. So I have a number of variables I can create, and I've created one called $_session user. So while the entire session is running, and every time, oh, by the way, you might be wondering, when it gets down to here, I do think I clarified this before, but just in case, it doesn't start a new session every time it gets here. If a previous session is already running, all session start does is make sure that that service continues to run. So it doesn't end, doesn't keep starting new sessions. Every time we load, we haven't got a new session starting. It will continue to run the last session. So if it detects one. So when we come down to here, I can create this variable called session user, and that will exist while the session exists. Simple. So it will put the first name into user, and we can see that's now been set. Gets to the else, ignores that, jumps to here, runs the code. If is not set, but it is set this time. For the first time we can see that this is set. So this whole code here doesn't get run because it's all to do with if there is no session user. There is, we've just created it. So it jumps to the else statement, and this is the code it runs here. What it does is it takes the session user, assigns it to a local variable. Welcome to your contact book, $name becomes an echo, and then it sends the log off text, gives you log out, but with the ability to log off and using this piece of instruction as the action. And we can see the only difference is log equals out. And if we look back at our page, there's the log out, and if you look at the bottom left hand side of the screen you can see it says index.php log equals out, and now I've got a little drop down saying log off. That's everything for this page. All we've got to do now is just check the log off part. So let's just see what happens when I click on log out. Up here you'll see the page will load, but we don't see the log off. So why not? Well, let's have a look at what happens. When we click on that command, it certainly sends the log equals out. So when it gets and starts running this page again, it is set when it gets to here. It then says if get log is equal to out. Well, it is set to out when we first click on that log out section. And here's the good part. This then clears the session. It clears the session from memory, therefore ends the session. So next time, well, we'll get onto next time, but basically that session now has ended. Very important, a lot of people forget this. You need to destroy the session. It's a safety, otherwise you do what we call leak information. Use session destroy, gets rid of everything out of your memory, including session user. So that will be destroyed and won't exist. Then we have the header location, so we're telling the computer to reload the index page again, and then we exit. And that's why we don't see the log equals out, because then what the system does is it goes back to the beginning, runs to here, gets the session start. There is no session running now, so starts a fresh new session, builds a database, blah blah blah, builds a page as normal. Hopefully you've got enough screen evidence there. You can see this top part of the code, lines 1 to 34. Pause the video, type those up, then we can go down to line 34. And there's line 34. You've already got line 34. That's the rest of the information there, down to line 67, which will give you most of what you're looking for. And then once you pause this and type this up, we can then go down to line 67. And you can see the very last part. Oh, it pops, there you go. Very last part on here, which gives us our log out section. The rest of this document has not changed at all. That is this entire system, aside from one or two extra features. And let's just clarify what those are. We can still see the add, edit, delete. As I said, this is the penultimate video. I might have been implying earlier that this was the last one. It's not. I'm going to deal with those in a later video, the next one, where we finish off this system, and you'll have a full contact book ready for you to then start to make much more complex, much more security conscious, and much more interesting system. Until then, goodbye.